Greetings, and welcome to Unveiling a Titan, Part 3, where we'll be taking a deep dive into the ear of Montgo. I've been gathering data on this mountain for over a year now, and in that time, it's the discoveries I'm going to share with you today that were by far the most mind-blowing. Once I began to suspect that Montgo might actually be a giant elephant, I wanted to make sure that I didn't engage in cherry picking or subconsciously twist my findings to fit preconceived notions. I decided to approach my study of the mountain like a forensic scientist, examining the tissues of the mountain as objectively and honestly as I could. I never suspected that the journey would begin to read like a detective novel. I started by taking a close look at elephant anatomy, while asking the question, if this were truly a fossilized elephant, what kinds of things would I expect to find? And then I'd head to the mountain in search of corroborating evidence. And much to my surprise, far more often than expected, the things I'd find actually matched my predetermined expectations. Initially, I thought it was just a coincidence, a cosmic prank. But as the coincidences began to stack up, I became more and more convinced that Montgo might actually be a gigantic fallen elephant. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask you to pay close attention to the coincidence bell and think about how many times it's rung throughout these first 3 videos. Honestly, I don't have the first clue about how one would begin to try and calculate the odds on something like this. My guess is that the odds of this all being chance are astronomical. Clearly, if the mountain has a particular shape that resembles an elephant, well, we can chalk that up to coincidence. But when there's a long list of very specific items that suggest that it's more than a resemblance, well, then we're dealing with a different animal, or the same animal in this case. I encourage skepticism. I think we should all be skeptical and willing to question anything, so feel free to verify anything I've presented for yourself. I showed this coincidence list in the first video, and since recording that video, there have already been a few more items added to the list. The items in yellow are the ones that we've already covered in the previous videos. The ones in blue we'll be covering today, and the remainder we'll cover in the 4th and 5th video. If by the end of this video you aren't scratching your head just a bit and considering that Montgo might have actually been an elephant, then I'd ask you to check your pulse and make sure your heart's still thumping. So my friends, are you ready to have some fun? Let me start by telling you something that might already be enough to get your head spinning a little bit. What if I told you that this mountain, according to official geology, is said to be made of bone? You'd think I was pulling your leg, right? But let me show you something. This mountain is made out of limestone, and let's look at what official geology has to say about limestone. It's a sedimentary rock composed mainly of skeletal fragments of marine organisms, such as coral, forams, and mollusks. So the official story is that this mountain has been created obviously through tectonic activity, which has pushed the layers upward, and that those layers are actually made from the compressed fragments of bone, skeleton, and coral that were compressed under the ocean over millions of years of time. So essentially they're telling us that limestone is bone, which I find to be incredibly fascinating considering the topic that we're looking at. So one of the things that I was confused about was this color red here, because the limestone is all the gray, and then I wanted to find out why is all this red here? Because after visiting the eye and discovering that there were a number of anatomical features that matched an eye socket, I started to look at the rest of the head, and it was around that time that I actually noticed this quarter moon shaped thing here. But the color is different, and what I realize is that everywhere that the color is reddish, the rock has broken away. So I started to think, wait a minute, these are different layers of what is potentially a sandwich. So take a look at this. You can see here we have a number of different layers. The periosteum is just a skin-like covering that's on top of the bone. Then you have what's known as cortical bone. This is solid bone that's got very little in the way of vascularity. And then you have this area here, the spongious bone. This is where blood is produced in all of the vertebrates, in our long bones primarily, but also in the skull. And then you have another layer of the sandwich underneath, which would be the bedrock in which these are anchored. So if we look back at Montgo, you can see that all of this is broken away, as has this area here. And as I showed in the first video, this also happens to be a spot where the Must gland could potentially have been. There's a big indentation here where the gland could have been, or it could have been attached in here and this broke away. It also could have conceivably been here. So I'm speculating on the location, but if we look at the location here, eye, Must gland, ear, you can see it changes location a bit depending on which elephant you're looking at. But this is what we're talking about. So this sits on top of the temporalis muscle. And so if this were to be pulled away, it might be that we would see, well, this is without the Must gland present. And then you can see here, if we look at the connections of the ear, that if this were to be torn away, it would be exposing bone. And I think that's what we're seeing here. So why would it be reddish? Well, the bone of the skull here and all of the long bones of the body are all producing blood. This is the trabecular bone. This is where blood is produced, and blood is filled with iron until it becomes oxygen poor. In other words, the venous blood is not going to have the reddish color, and when it fossilizes, it turns black. But here we're looking at what's known as trabecular bone, and in the fourth video I'm going to go into this into a lot of detail. It is very fascinating, and it's fractal in nature, so it's scalable, and it can be microscopic or macroscopic. And if we look on top of Montgo, off in the distance, this is the cross here, and this is the highest point apart from the head, so this is the upper back. And then you can see here, this is all limestone, and this is essentially trabecular bone. So the upper layer of the sandwich has eroded and has disappeared, and because of the vertical direction, the elements, the wind, the rain, everything, all of the red earth has been washed away, and the limestone has been bleached out so that it looks like bone. But you can still see the vascularity, and all of these rocks are anchored firmly into the bedrock below. And that also makes the mountain very difficult to climb. So you have to stick to the trails, because if you go off the beaten path, especially if you don't have good shoe wear, you are doomed, and I can speak from experience. So the official story is that this is known as karst. So it's limestone, which is very different from, if we look back here, totally different shape here, right? And we don't see any of the vascularity, we don't see any of the reddish blood kind of soil. But when we're looking at this kind of thing, this is the official story. So what we're seeing is the process of erosion, and you can see that it's eroding here, and this is going to erode where you have the blood channels, and then the blood is going to disappear. So that's known as karst. And here's what I was talking about before. You can see the fractal nature. So here we have larger trabecular bone, and then here we have the smaller stuff. Well, that goes down to the microscopic level as well. So again, I'm theorizing that the ear obviously has fallen off because it's not there, and that has exposed a section of the mountain that was underneath that is going to be filled with the iron-rich blood. And ironically, what do we have here? We have the exact shape, even continuing up to here, of where an ear attachment would be, and it's exactly where it should be in relationship to the shape of the head and the neck and the shoulder. So when I first came to that realization that, holy moly, this could be spongeous bone that's been exposed because the outer layer of the cortical bone has fallen off, and everywhere you see the rock has fallen off, it's red underneath. And I have countless examples of that, and in a variety of different kinds of rock. So that was totally mind-blowing, and I realized, well, there's an ear attachment. What if there's an ear canal? Because this side of the mountain has been very well preserved. If we compare it to this side, which collapsed, the chances of finding an ear canal here were much higher. So I started to look into trails. I wanted to see if I could find the name of this trail up here, because it seemed to lead right up to this section of the mountain, and it's very steep here, and it wasn't easy going. So I hiked up, but before I did that, I tried to find the name of this canyon, because I wanted to make sure I took the right road up so that I could get to where I wanted to go. And what I found is that this particular canyon here is called Barranc del Migdia. Yeah, so I started to search, and then I came across this, and I got goosebumps when I saw it. It says Cova del Barranc del Migdia. So Cova means cave. So I was looking for I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about this. So I was looking for a path up so that I could explore to see if there was perhaps a cave here. I came across the name of the canyon, and in searching for the name of the canyon, I found that there were actual links describing a cave. I couldn't believe it. I said, there's a cave there? Oh my gosh. So I found this website, and you can see the link there. I'll provide the link in the notes. And there's some videos here which we're going to go through in just a moment. But basically, what I found out is that there is indeed a cave there. And guess where it is? It is right here, where you would expect an ear canal to be. So you can see the arrow there showing exactly where the entry is. Looking a little closer, and that's the actual entrance. Now, again, I want to emphasize, I knew nothing about this cave before I started to go and explore in this area. And what I found out is not only is there a cave there, but, and I kid you not, this cave happens to be the most thoroughly excavated cave in all of Europe. They brought in a team of archaeologists to study this cave in a way that had not been done before. So not only did I not know that there was a cave there, or that it was located exactly where it should be if there were indeed an ear, but it just happens to be the most thoroughly excavated cave in Europe. The cave is called Cova del Migdia. Migdia is midday. So Barranc del Migdia is the valley of the midday, and then you have the cave. Yeah. So let's take a look at this video, and we'll just skip through it. I'll provide links in the show notes. So this excavation was quite a big deal. The whole community got involved. They had a large team of people that were brought in to take care of it. You can hear these interviews. They're excavating the bones, mapping it out. Got fly-throughs. So this is the team of archaeologists actually working their way up into the cave. You need climbing gear. It's at 375 meters altitude, and some of the face of the mountain is fairly vertical, so you don't want to be an amateur up there. I've never been there, so I'm going to be speculating a bit with things, but I think you'll find that some of my conclusions are not a reach whatsoever. So here they are entering the cave. You can see here the reddish earth. So once again, the entrance. Take a look at this. I told you it was the most thoroughly excavated cave in Europe, at least at the time when they did the excavation. I don't know about since then. But that is a 3D rendering of the inside of the cave. Obviously, this is not an elephant ear, but the anatomy is very likely similar, if not identical, when it comes to the structure of the inner ear and location. But you can see here that we have a canal coming in. There's a channel going down. This is known as the eustachian tube. And then you have what's known as the internal carotid artery. So this Cova del Migdia has 3 different sections of cave. They have the one entering where they're climbing in with their ropes. And then we're going to see an actual fly-through here in a moment. And you can decide for yourself whether you think it matches up with what we're seeing here. So this is the inner ear. There's a chamber here where you have the 3 bones. These are the semicircular canals, which have to do with balance. And then this is very important. This is known as the cochlea. And the cochlea is how we hear. And the sound vibrations, they move the eardrum. It vibrates the 3 bones, which press against a little window here. And then it pushes fluid through this spiral, and that's how we hear the different tones that we're hearing, and we can recognize whether something is high pitch or low pitch. So that's the anatomy that we're looking at. Here's another view of it coming in, and then this chamber with the cochlea. Again, the entrance, right where it should be. And this we'll come back to in a moment. So there's actually video. This website here is in Spanish. You can probably translate it. It's got the different videos that I'm going to be showing you. I've found some others as well. This is called Art y Mort, which is art and death. And this is the exact same video, but it's been translated into English, and it's got a narrator that sounds a lot like the guy who does the nature shows, Attenborough. I don't think it is, but anyway. So let's take a look here. I've muted it. I don't want to get any copyright strikes. So this is fair use for educational purposes. So here's the fly through. Down a long passageway, and then it curves to the right. We come into a central chamber. And I believe what we're turning around here is the cochlea. Now it goes down to the left, and this opens out. This is why it's called Cova del Migdia, because this cave receives light from the sun right at midday. So I'm theorizing that this opening of the Cova del Migdia may be this area here. So because that drops down and then it opens out. So if we look over here, I'm not sure which one of these it is, but it's one of these caves here is this opening. And I think that may be either the eustachian tube or perhaps the carotid artery that's closer to the neck, to the back of the skull. And there's also a number of cave paintings, which I'll cover in a moment. Or actually, I'll just cover it now. So to me, this looks a lot like a deluge. Almost looks like a guy laying on his back, and then to me this looks like major water coming from above, but I don't know what their interpretation of that is. That one's hard to make out, as is that, but this, to me, looks a lot like an animal with tusks. 4-legged creature. Here they are doing the excavation. So they found the remains of several people. They theorize that the remains were brought from somewhere else, perhaps in a bag, and then left there because the skeletons were not complete. They go into an analysis of the bones and the damage to the bones. Bones within bones. All right, now, this is where it really gets mind-blowing. And I just made this discovery a few days ago. And I may be wrong, as I said, I'm speculating because I haven't actually been inside the cave to see the lay of the land and know what things look like. But I don't think this is such a stretch. So first let's look at the ear again. So I talked about the cochlea, which is this section here. You would enter in a long straight canal, there would be an inner chamber, and then that would permit you to get into here and possibly inside of the cochlea. So here you see it more clearly, and then this is what it would look like. So I'll explain how this functions in just a moment, but if you look at these channels here, this is going to be very important for something that we're going to see in the cave in a moment. So this is a cross section, and we have different kinds of fluids. So you have the endolymph, and then you have the paralymph, which this is what's vibrated, and then this vibration moves in a spiral way through the cochlea, and as it does, it's stimulating little hair follicles that are here. This is called the organ of Corti, and basically what happens is the vibrations come through and they move the hair follicles, and then those are neurons that stimulate sound. So that's how we perceive sound, is that it's coming through this liquid that's vibrating, and then it's pushing on these hair follicles. And then here's another look at it. So these are what the hair follicles look like under a microscope. Okay, so here we're going to have a fly through the cave. Comes up briefly, and then it starts to head downward. And as we come through here, it enters into a central chamber, continues down to the right, and this is what I want to show you here. So this is a curved cave that's curving down to the right, and here on the side, I believe these formations are the hair follicles that have fossilized. And it's spiraling down to the right. You can see the curve of the cave. Now at this point, it continues to the right, and it continues curving, and I have another video I'll show in a second of somebody actually crawling through it. And then it goes down to the left, and that opens up to the outside world. That's the Cova del Migdia. Oh, look here. How about that? Doesn't that look a bit organic? That to me looks very much like the opening of a blood vessel. Could be wrong, but yeah, so it opens up here. Okay, this cave he's in, you can see the formations there on the right. Looks a lot like hair follicles, right? So this cave, look at the shape of the cave. Kind of looks like the cochlea turned on its side, right? And he's curving around to the right. So to me, it looks a lot like a spiral, and without actually having been inside, I can't verify that 100%. But if we go back to the anatomy picture that I was showing you before, so entering into a central chamber, we've got this, and depending on the position of the elephant, and this appears to be turned on its side, otherwise he would be going up, 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 and then having to drop back down. So it's hard to know exactly what the positioning of this would be inside of the elephant and in relationship to how the elephant is lying. But again, if we look at these structures here, this is inside an X-ray of the cochlea, and we think about this shape of this spiraling around one way or the other, depending on which direction the spiral is going. And then what we would be looking at, I think, to the right of him as he's crawling through the cave, is this structure here, these hair cells and the structure supporting them. Another view again. So that's speculation, but who knows? Maybe there's some truth to it, that this may be those structures. It certainly seems to be that shape. You have the three different caves, which represent the entry to the of the ear itself, the potential drop down of the eustachian tube, which is the tube that's used, the body has for drainage of fluid from the inner ear. When people get ear infections, oftentimes there's blockages in the eustachian tube. And then this looks a heck of a lot like the spiraling cochlea, and him exiting there. All right, so yeah, somebody sent me these. They liked the videos, and I thought this was a better representation of what might actually be happening with Montgo. How many coincidences does it take before we start to have a preponderance of evidence? That's what you have to ask yourself. What do you think? If you're a skeptic and you thought that I was suffering from a very advanced case of pareidolia, do you still think so? How many coincidences is it going to take before you start to think there might be something to this whole story? So basically what we're seeing here is the entrance to the cave goes deep in, and then it branches off and it goes down and opens up here. But it also goes deeper in, and that's where that spiral area is that guy is crawling through. And if we look at this, the question is, well, why does this open up to the outer world? Shouldn't it all be inside the head? And I think that is answered by this picture here. This is obviously the here we go. So this is the carotid artery that feeds the brain, and it goes right through the ear. And in fact, if you look here, you can see that the internal carotid artery is coming in here, and then it's curving downward. So that opening could either be the carotid artery, or it could be the eustachian tube. In fact, this looks like it's going down at that angle and then opening up. Yeah. So that was the ear of Montgo. I hope you found it interesting. On the next video, the next couple of videos, we're going to be going into detail about the histology of the mountain, the different rocks that I've found, and how those correlate to the various tissues of the creature. And it'll be a little slower and may not be as exciting as this one, but if you're interested in everything that's come so far, you'll find it very, very interesting, I am certain. So if you like, can click subscribe and like and hit the bell and share it with your friends if you find it interesting. I think that the evidence is mounting that Titans once existed. Yeah, I think Montgo was once a great Titan. Have a great day.